great to have you here. It was a year ago that we formed the Majority Coalition Caucus. I think my first day as leader I spent on that process, and we feel good about it. After 1 year of focusing on jobs, education, and budgets, we're still together, and we look forward to another session together. So I'll turn it over to the other members.
Well, you know, it really was kind of a whole new experience trying to do government differently. I mean, if you look at what's happening in DC and the gridlock, clearly, one, that's not what people want, and two, it's not a functional way to run government. And trying to do things in a much more bipartisan manner, you know, our original concept was we'd have 6 committees that would be chaired by Republicans, 6 by Democrats, and then 3 co-chaired committees. That didn't fully come to fruition, but you know, we do have 2 Democratic chairs. We do have transportation, which is probably one of the hottest committees out there right now, is a co-chair committee, and it's working. That's the great thing. I think that the thing that we did, one, we stayed to our core principles. We had signed up, as far as all of us, all 25 of us at that point, and said, you know, there's lots of things that we might disagree on, but the things that we agree on and that really matter to the citizens of Washington State are jobs, education, and a sustainable budget. And we lived up to that. I mean, if you look at how we reprioritized spending in state government, I think the most clear picture out there is for the last 30 years, non-education expenses have outgrown education expenses by 2 to 1. Now, all of us, every one of us, when we're trying to get elected and come down to Olympia, say, you know, education's the paramount duty. It's my #1 priority. But for the last 30 years, that hasn't been the case. And with this majority coalition, we turn that around. If you look at growth in government, 11.7% growth in education funding and 3% in general government. I mean, that tells the whole story of what we did.
I think one of the most exciting things for me personally, having spent 10 years in the House, but coming in as a new member of the Senate and having this opportunity to work in a truly bipartisan way with the Majority Coalition was one of the most exciting things that I had experienced since being in the legislature. I approached it with a little skepticism, quite frankly, and many of us probably thought, well, how's this really going to work? It's brand new. No one has ever really done this that we know of recent. But what was so exciting is that everybody came together and we all agreed upon those core principles that we were going to work to achieve in this legislative session. And a year later, I believe that it's truly exciting that we accomplished those things that we said we were going to do. You know, I couldn't probably say I'd let you in the door of the caucus room at times and how we really made all that come together, but at the same time, we did. We put aside a lot of our own personal items that we were thinking and wanting, and really focused on those things that we were truly committed to doing. And that's truly one of the best wins of what's happened in the past year.
And I would say, as caucus chair, what Senator Bailey mentioned, at times we had very challenging conversations, but if anything, it pulled us together. As a caucus chair, it's my job to run the meetings, and always in the past, I've had an elephant right in front by my gavel. Now I have a donkey, because see, we have 2 Democrats in our caucus. And it's really been fun. We've had a sense of humor that's been developed among all of us, and I have to be honest, it's the most exciting year, and it's my 17th year in 2017, so it was really worthwhile. We went through a difficult time. As you know, we had the passing of former Senator Mike Carroll. That was a very difficult time for all of us. We did not expect that to happen. It prevented us from going on the floor to vote on issues because we had a tie. And when Senator Carroll was in the hospital, Senator Hargrove voted on his behalf. But as soon as he passed, of course, that didn't happen. So that did slow us down a bit, and in my opinion, is the reason we went into a special session. But it really, in the end, pulled us together, and I'm just really proud. It was a successful year that I don't think any of us expected how successful it was.
I think the reason why we went into a special session is nobody thought we'd ever last, and they were waiting us out to blow apart, and then they could go negotiate and raise taxes. And we stuck together, and they didn't, that was plan A. They didn't have a plan B. And when we stuck together, it really kind of threw a wrench in the system.
One of the things, just really quick, that we talked about, doing things differently, getting different results, and in a bipartisan fashion. Education is one of the areas where I think that stands out the most. When you think about a budget that had $1 billion in additional into basic education, that passes with 44 votes off the Senate floor, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats vote no, that's tremendous. When you look at our big policy bill, it wasn't just about funding, it was also about strategically addressing the opportunity and achievement gap, that we have large pockets of poor and minority students in this state that have not been getting an appropriate education. That gap has persisted for decades. And in addition to investing more money, we invested money in a targeted way in several programs and brought policies in place specifically aimed at closing that gap, at making sure that in addition to prioritizing education, we're also making sure that we're getting to all children.
Okay, you ready for questions?
Sure, Eric.
Okay. Well, Senator Tom, there was a story that appeared in the Seattle Times yesterday that had an odd bit of wording. It said that when you and Senator Sheldon decided to caucus, form the Majority Coalition Caucus, there were only 23 Democrats in the Senate. So I'm wondering a little bit about, how strong the Democratic element has been in the Majority Coalition Caucus and how this has been different than, say, a simple Republican majority.
Well, I think if you look at healthcare, what we were able to do in, taking those the federal dollars and moving forward with that, I don't know if that would have happened. But again, I think that, we really stuck together on the principles of, let's get a budget that makes sense, that's sustainable. I think as a Democrat, I think the most regressive tax out there is those liabilities we're pushing on our kids. It's terrible. It's wrong. And I think what we're doing is saying enough is enough. On the B&O, it's a great example of building trust back in government. If we ever, and I think that there's things that we do need to do to rebalance the tax code. I mean, basically we have a tax code that's predicated on a industrial model, and we're clearly not there as far as an economy. But you can never have those conversations if you don't build the trust. And when you sit there and say a tax is a temporary tax, and then you make it permanent, you lose that trust. And I think that's one of the fundamental things that we did. But again, this really hasn't been so much about labels. This is about doing what's right for the citizens of Washington State.
And I think the sustainability element on that budget was hugely important to build that trust also. Year after year, we come back into session and there's always a huge deficit, or it's said that there's a huge deficit. And having a 4-year look at that budget for sustainability was hugely important, that we would do that and make it real. I mean, it was not, those were real numbers. We weren't moving the shells around. We weren't doing anything. So I think that built more trust. Also, saying what we were going to do at the beginning and then doing it also built trust with the people. And just showing that we could do it and that it wasn't, unattainable. That was hugely important.
Senator Schoesler, why hasn't this bipartisan coalition, however, been able to pass a transportation pact?
Well, I think we had a huge job ahead of us with the general fund budget. We went from a $900 million deficit and calls to breach the public's trust on taxes to a budget that's balanced for 4 years and put this huge investment into K-12 and higher ed, thanks to Senator Bailey and Senator Baumgartner, no tuition hike. We focused huge efforts on that. You know, and I think what we're seeing now is the complexity of doing it right in transportation. The most important thing is doing it right for the entire state. Not just one region, not just a couple legislators, but this coalition represents people that are pretty urban, like Senator Tom and Senator Litzo. We also have people in rural corners of Washington. Getting it right for everybody is what's so important. And I think that's what the negotiators are seeing now, in that getting it right is very, very complex. And to get it right is the most important thing.
But I would say the House hasn't passed one either. I mean, without a bond package, you don't have a transportation package. I mean, in their first year, they had spent $250 million of proceeds from a bond package that was never passed. So they didn't have a package either. But the important thing is, you know, moving forward, looking at it again, it's going to take both Republican and Democrats in the House, Republican and Democrats in the Senate, to get something that not only works for Olympia, but more importantly, what works out in Washington. Because when you're looking at, you know, a $12 billion plus package, the people are going to have a say. And that's really what we're fundamentally trying to do with our reforms, is making sure that if and when we get something out of Olympia, that it withstands that public scrutiny.
Instead of trying to follow up, would there be a special session before the regular session coming up in January?
We're working as fast and hard, but again, taking Mark's words, it's more important to do it right. I think, you know, 10 years from now, people aren't going to know that, oh, maybe they took an extra week or so. I think what's more important is doing it right.
And any chance of meeting King County's December 31st deadline before they try to go off on their own to save Metro?
We're going to do what's right for the citizens of Washington State as a whole state. And I think if you look at the package that we proposed from the Majority Coalition, there's a lot of local options in there for King County that really make a difference for those programs. So, you know, I think everybody needs to hold on. It's important not only just for transit. Transit needs roads. I mean, last time I checked, buses need to run on pavement. And we got a lot of projects. And then you look at kind of the Boeing equation as far as just from the employment community. We need to make sure that we do stuff that really drives the economic development. I'll give you an example. One of the projects we have in the transportation project is in my district, the 148th interchange on 520. It's a $35 million project. That $35 million project opens up, currently it would open up a $900 million development, 1.2 million square feet of office space. I think there's like 1,500 residences, a 200 person hotel. 900 million, just the sales tax on that, you know, you're looking at 80 some million bucks. I mean, that's double. And so I think the thing that I'm most proud of as far as our package is the way Senator King has really structured this around what really drives the fundamentals in economic development, in congestion relief. It's not, well, I need Barbara's vote and I need, you know, Senator Parlette's vote, and yeah, these aren't great projects, but I need their vote. We really have looked at it on what is going to move Washington forward.
Okay, but how long are you 2 weeks away, 4 weeks away, 2 months away? And I really want to pin you down because this has been going on for 8 to 11 months, depending on where you start your clock. And we've been hearing we're close for several months. It's I'm beating up on you because you're saying more of the same.
Well, again, I'll go back to the most important thing we do is get the job done right. You know, we get one swing at this bat. I think the worst thing that we can do is cram something out of Olympia that fails in the public with that public vote. And if that happens, I think it sets transportation back, 4 to 5 years. And John, I went on 8 of those 10 tours. I think we need a transportation package, but more importantly, I think we need to do one that lives through the public scrutiny.
Okay, I've watched this, the legislature as a whole cram a 8.7 billion Boeing package through in 3 days. I watched you guys, and again, I'll hold the Democrats to this as well. When the final budgets come out, you cram those things through in like 1 day, and everyone complains because they have no idea what's actually in the package.
Actually, John, this is interesting to me. I've never served on transportation in my entire career, but I'm expected to help move this process along. The complexities of this package actually make a budget look fairly simple because there's revenue, there are reforms, there's policies, there's timing issues of making the revenue fit with the projects. All across the state, this thing, for a non-transportation person, I've learned how phenomenally complex it is, and it's made me appreciate the efforts of transportation people that work tirelessly on this more than I ever have in my career because of complexity.
And John, to say that we crammed through the Boeing package is
You
simply
did cram through the Boeing
misguided,
package.
okay? Because Senator Bailey, myself, Senator Erickson, and a whole bunch of people were on the 777 task force. I will say that the package we passed out of Olympia, we had basically agreed to those elements probably a month or 6 weeks prior to coming in there. So that was not something that was ill thought. I mean, we had really thought through that. Now, granted, there's elements that we were fighting for that the company has been wanting that we still think need to go forward,
Right.
as far as fish consumption and workers' comp. That was really, in the 6-week period, that's really where the arguments were over. But as far as the package that was passed out of here, that was a really well thought of package.
What
Given
are the
that you're
arguments
going
now
into
in
the Christmas
transportation?
holidays, our negotiations going to drag into the regular session,
I think,
realistically.
Andrew, I believe that our negotiators will continue to meet regularly and sincerely, and I believe that the other corners, as well as the governor, will continue sincere negotiations right through. I have no question about that.
I was down here yesterday and we'll be back down here Thursday.
Senator Tom, you talk about transit needs roads, but the Democrats will say transit needs buses and transit needs other things. And they say only 2% of the package would be for alternatives, if you will, transit, bike, ped. Is that enough? Is 2% just too low?
It's not 2%. I mean, you really have to look at this from a systemic standpoint, and it's really about 15% is the number. When you look at the state package, the local options, you're at 15%. Now you have to remember that about 3% of trips are, via transit. So 15% is a pretty good number.
But 50% assuming King County, passes that. I mean, they're saying if the cash outlaid in this, only 2% would go to alternatives.
Right, but you have to look at it from a systemic standpoint. I mean, one of the things in trying to craft a transportation package is that, we have a lot of complicated needs, a lot of different areas. You have very rural
Yes.
areas, very congested suburban and urban areas. And, between those three counties, they need a very different solution. So I think having a over-encompassing statewide package and then tailoring those local options to the needs of the individual localities is a smart way to go about it.
Senator, what are the hangups now?
A lot of it is, funding as far as, again, kind of that roads, transit mix, where should that be? What we have generally, advocated for is distributing dollars out to the locals, both the counties and the cities, and saying, what's best for your area, okay? If transit is really your highest priority, then you can spend this money however you want. The House, I would say, is trying to, from Olympia, say, we know what's best for you, and here's the pocket that needs to go into pedestrian pathways, here's how much needs to go into bikes, here's how much needs to go into transit. We got 39 counties in this state, and you got a lot of different areas that have a lot of different needs, and we're going to put that trust into local government to do what's best
We all-
for the locals.
We also need the reforms that we've been talking about to once again build the trust with the general public. I mean, you guys have been reporting issues around transportation for years now. So if we don't have some of the reforms that we've been talking about to make sure that that tax dollar that we're about to impose upon the people is spent wisely, then we will miss the boat.
Now, Democrats say they've agreed to some reforms.
Literally.
So what further reforms are needed?
You know, we've talked about those repeatedly. Some of those are still being negotiated. And I think that we're going to hopefully find some of those reforms in the total package.
So there's another key difference between, I mean, as we pointed out, Senator King's plan is a more balanced plan for the state of Washington as opposed to being kind of Seattle and King County centric. Another very important aspect of Senator King's plan is it completes projects.
Right.
It gets them done so we can use them. A great example is an illustration in my district. The much delayed completion of Highway 167, which has been waiting for 40 years. The House package has part of it at 4 lanes and part of it at 2 lanes, meaning we have to come back again to it. And in the meanwhile, our citizens who drive on that, every time they have to neck down and cross over from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, are going to say, do these people not understand how to build roads? It erodes public confidence. Senator King's plan has it completing it with 4 lanes the whole way through. The same with the north-south freeway. It's about doing things that in general, they're good for our economy, that make sense to our citizens, and therefore will build confidence.
And if you look at the 520 bridge, I mean, that is a huge difference. The House had $35 million for the 520 bridge. Basically, you have a bridge that ends in the middle of the lake. Our package completes that entire corridor. I mean, can you imagine having 6 lanes going down to 2 lanes, and you have an inside carpool lane that all of a sudden has to go from the inside going down from 3 to 2 and then switching over to the outside lane? I mean, if you want to talk about a mess, and that's what the House had in their package. I mean, we have really thought through this thing as far as, again, congestion relief, economic impact, and completing what we've started.
And
But-
maintenance and operation.
Oh, can I just follow up on the vote and the idea that this is going to the public one way or another? I mean, it's just a reality, isn't it, that King County has, what, 1/3 of the voters? I mean, don't you have to respond a little bit more to King County if you're going to win this for the whole state?
And I think we
Like on
have,
transit,
with
like on-
we have with our local options in making sure. I mean, King County's needs are very different than Senator Parlette's needs and Senator Bailey's needs, and you know, everybody look at the 5 of us, and this is just 5 of 49. All of us have very different needs in our districts, and that's why I think the way we've tailored this, we meet what we need to do from a statewide system. Because like, if King County were just to go and all we did was transit, we're not going to be able to do the 509s, the north-souths, the 148th interchange that are going to have huge economic impacts. You know, Boeing hasn't made a decision, but you know, we need to make sure that this state is ready to do business. And what we're trying to do is create an atmosphere where people can get to their jobs, and you have an investment that creates, you know, short-term gains as far as the sales tax.
Okay, here's one that's completely different, okay?
Okay.
I'm kind of interested in the role of the Majority Coalition Caucus with regard to environmental legislation. Basically, the Inslee administration is pushing a gigantic raft of policy right now. We've got Initiative 937, we've got fish consumption. Let's see, we've got the cap and trade policy. We've possibly got the idea of low carbon fuel standards by executive order. And I'm wondering, what are your concerns here? What's the position that the Majority Coalition Caucus is going to play, et cetera?
Sure, I'll give you some generals and some specifics, Eric. Fish consumption, we're discussing how much stronger the standards will be. Our members care about the environment. How much more stringent can we be with the available technology without killing jobs, whether it's at Boeing or whether it's at Inland Paper in Spokane? We're looking at how does this regulation impact low-income consumers? If you're a low-income person, you disproportionately pay more for your electricity. We happen to care about low-income people too, and the jobs that they need. Many of these jobs, big increases in electric rates, really hurt the jobs as well as low-income residents of the state. And an executive order on low-carbon fuel standards, industry people have told us that 60 cents a gallon increase might be a very realistic level. Well, you know, that 60 cents a gallon isn't going to build any roads, and it's not going to attract a whole lot of jobs to this region, which is a real problem. And if it's done by executive order after we leave town, that really hurts the trust in government, that it wasn't passed by elected officials through committee processes. And I think all along, we've been very committed to restoring trust in government, meaning temporary is really temporary on B&O taxes, beer taxes. That's important. Making the 5-day rule a 5-day rule, not a 5-day suggestion. Those things, we need to restore the public trust. And finally, Eric, like I said, doing it after we leave town, I think hurts public trust in government.
Furthermore, if you want to guarantee a transportation package fails at the polls, enact a carbon tax by executive order and increase gas tax by 60 cents.
Do you think that Inslee needs to make some sort of a promise that he's not going to be doing that sort of a thing for a transportation?
Well, we heard very clearly, Washington Trucking Association has supported every transportation package in memory. Whether it came from Republicans or Democrats, they always supported it. They can't support it if you're going to have a 60-cent increase per gallon because of low carbon fuel standards. So
where do you get the 60 cent per gallon figure from?
that takes a median level, John, between the lowest estimate and the highest. And that's what the Washington Trucking Association's going with. And they want good roads. They want to end gridlock. They want economic development. They're just one example.
Okay,
But I think the governor needs to make a promise to the people of Washington State that, you know, he's going to continue to focus on growing this economy, growing jobs, and making Washington a great place to live.
Okay,
And I
whose
think we can
estimates
do
are
that.
these
John,
on that
I'm
it's,
speaking. You know, I think that there's a lot of things that we can do, and we got to get off this dichotomy that, you know, you can, it's either a strong economy or, and bad environmental regulations, or, you know, it's kind of a weak economy and great environmental regulations. You can have both.
Yes.
What we need to do is be much smarter as far as how we address the environmental concerns. I mean, look at the picture on the wall. I mean, that's the top of Mount Rainier. I've climbed all 5 volcanoes in Washington State. I care about the environment here, but I think we can be really smart and do it right and still make Washington the best place to have a job and grow a family.
Okay, whose estimates are on the 60%? I mean, the 60 cents. I've never heard that number. I'm not familiar with.
Right, well, they're industry estimates. I think you should talk to Larry personally at the Washington Trucking Association.
In the meantime,
They're people that have supported revenue packages in the past that are deeply concerned.
there's another question back
Jerry?
there.
Just, Eric, I want to follow up really quickly on Eric's question. One of the things I'd like to remind everybody that under Senator Jim Honeyford's leadership, we did the largest conservation project in the state of Washington, the Tiana Way. You know, we spent $100 million in setting aside pristine forests for the future. So I would resist the argument that Governor Inslee has a monopoly on trying to care for our environment.
Sounds like you're skeptical about these policies then.
Trust in government is the key to doing a lot of things. If we ever want to go back and examine a lot of different public policies, and they don't trust us, the legislature, because we all get lumped together, we can't do some of the really positive things that we could in the future.
So 2014, what's the plan A for 2014 for the Majority Coalition Caucus? Looking at
Jobs, education, budget.
what
And getting
specific-
Get out on time.
What specific policies do you think you want to try to pass and get signed by the governor that aren't in place today?
Well, we still have a lot to do as far as education reform.
Yes.
When it comes to McCleary is not about dollars. McCleary is about making sure that our kids have a world-class education. Dollars alone will not get you there. If you look at what we did in the Senate, I think we passed out 12 pretty substantial reforms education-wise that really would put us into that next level. You have to remember where we are as a state. When it came to race to the top, our own friends, the Obama administration, ranked us 32nd out of 32 states. I mean, if the Seahawks were in that position, we'd all have our heads down, okay? But education is so much more important than athletics, and we need to make sure that we're putting, our best players on the field. As far as, we had seniority legislation out there, making sure that when there are terminations, that it's based upon performance, not just how long has somebody been on there.
Just on the education, I know there are other ones. Are you looking to make further investments? It's been clear that you're not there all the way with McCleary. Is 2014 a year where you'll seek to make another couple $100 million investment?
I think the great thing is coming into 2014, there's no talk of deficits. There's no talk about we got to cut this, we got to cut that, because we did the budget right. We used real numbers. We didn't play games, and we lived up to our principle that we were going to create a sustainable budget. And there's no better proof that in 2014, guess what? Coming back to Olympia, there's no deficit.
Okay, so no more money for education. What other policies do you anticipate?
Well, I think workers' comp is another example of something that's unfinished.
Right.
Our small employers in the state are crying out for relief in one of the most expensive workers' comp systems in the United States. The beauty of the legislation we worked on last year, Jerry, it's voluntary. It's a voluntary participation that has the potential for huge savings. That is what small businesses, medium businesses, and larger employers are all looking for. And being number one in payroll taxes is not anything I covet.
And Jerry, I want to make a correction there.
Going
We said no new money for education, and that's not what we said. I think whatever money is available in this next cycle, and there may not be a lot, we'll have to wait and see how the final revenue forecasts come in. But I think you can expect that whatever budget passes, if we even need a supplemental budget, that it will reflect a continued prioritization of education by this caucus. That we believe our Constitution when it says paramount duty, and one of the things that we're doing differently is living up to what it says.
Last session, the budget was your leverage to try to get some of these issues through. You're not going to really have that this session, given it's a supplemental and you're not in the hole. So how will you bring these up and try to get Democrats to go along?
Well, leverage as far as Washington needs more jobs. We need to do everything that we can to create those jobs, as far as create the environment that makes jobs come to Washington, stay in Washington, and that's the leverage.
I would hope that our friends across the aisle, the Rotunda and the governor's office, listen to small businesses about their concerns this session. Don't listen to us. Listen to the tens of thousands of small businesses in the state that are looking for help. They're not part of our caucus. They're the backbone of employment in the state.
Aside from workers' comp and the education issues you mentioned, are there any other priorities you expect to bring up this session for your
Well, I think
caucus?
there's some things we can do with our retro programs that can help out.
If you could explain retro.
Well, that's a group participation in L&I. They've shown great results for their members to hold down costs and still do a great job of benefiting workers. So, Senator Holmquist has a package that's still out there. We want to see people listen to those small businesses and definitely impose no more burdens on those small businesses because they are our greatest job creators.
What's the proposal for filling the budget gap if you do sales tax diversion, on transportation staff, 60, 70 million a year or something like that? What's the,
Well-
Democrats obviously worried about.
Well, there is no budget gap because that's not included in the forecast. If you look at from the Forecast Council, they don't have those numbers in there because there's no transportation, so there is no gap.
So that's your answer. It doesn't worry you. It's not in the.
You can't lose money you don't have.
Gotcha.
Furthermore, that's kind of one-time money, and the last thing we want to do is build support for our education system on one-time money and cause a big problem in sustainability the next cycle. We got to be doing this in a way that works long-term, provides the stability that people need.
Wait, Senator, can I follow up on that point? I was under the impression the budget that you passed and approved in the legislature only directed funds, that most of that $1 billion for education was a 4-year, most of it was transfer of REAP money and other sources, and it had a time specific that it'll expire, so that in 4 years, it goes away. So it isn't ongoing sustainable funds, is it?
Well, I would say that, it was a negotiated settlement. There were some of those things that we would have preferred. We had options out there that were long-term and provided permanent, stable funding for our schools. In the negotiations, we had to make some allowances and some adjustments. We are going to have to make some further allowances out beyond 4 years, but that's also when the projections are that we're going to have $1 billion in additional revenue due to natural growth, not facing another deficit in the out years.
You got to remember, next biennia, there's $2.8 billion more in revenue.
But as we sit here today, the legislature does not have long-term sustainable funding for education in place.
Absolutely we do. I mean, look at the budget we have today. We have a $33.6 billion budget. Education, we're at about 15.1. Last time I checked, 33.6 is greater than 15.1. We have all the money we need for education. If we're going to have a conversation around the need for more money, it's not about our paramount duty. It's about other government functions. And if they want to have that conversation, then let's have that conversation. But we should never have a conversation about that we need new revenue for education.
Well, overall, what do you guys have to say to those who thought that the Majority Coalition Caucus was only going to last 5 minutes?
Come,
Well, I think-
come join us.
Right.
Come join us. Come
You know,
join us.
I think the one person that believed in us, Austin, you should be listening now. Austin had a column with Dan Evans that I read last year. And Dan Evans was the one person that believed we could do it. And it happened to have Austin's name attached to it, that 50 years ago it was done. We did it again. The public didn't think our ideas were too radical. They rewarded us with another member. And Jan Angel is going to be a great addition that I think she's really committed to focusing on the things we want to focus on. So the voters rewarded us. Austin did a great job with Dan Evans' his crystal ball. And we're still here.
And the big difference, Dan Evans, it was all behind the scenes. The Majority Coalition was all
All out
up front.
front.
Everybody's been able to watch us the whole time.
So he says that if you have a transportation package by the end of the regular session, he's fine. If that doesn't happen, then he's going to start to get concerned.
Who's that?
Dan Evans. He's
Well, you know, and
He's giving you till the end.
you know, we value elder statesmen like Senator Evans, and you know, he did some good things for this state. He set some precedents, and he's still a very credible person. He believed we could do it, and we appreciated that vote of confidence from Governor Evans.
Is the coalition growing? I mean, obviously you got Jan Angel, but are you actively trying to get Democrats? I mean, will there just be 2 Democrats this whole new session, or will there be more?
Well, we haven't had anybody apply for membership.
Well, but are you recruiting? I mean, obviously you would have even more
No, it's
kind of
it's
success.
it's,
if you
it's
had-
free.
I don't think this is so
It's-
much
it's
a
recruiting,
recruiting drive
right.
as it is
How come?
because what we're doing is saying this whole process is about working together. And I think that there's a lot of relationships in the Senate that now that they know that we are a stable and permanent entity, that, okay, these guys are around, you're going to have to deal with them. And so let's wait until they fall apart, that equation is off the table. And I think it's really about coming together, forget about the R's, forget about the D's, and do what's right for the citizens of Washington State.
It's going to be very important as we go forward to build those relationships and once again begin to trust each other. It's the one thing I think that binds us together is when we can build that relationship with people outside of our Majority Coalition Caucus and trust each other.
We walked on, you know, last year, I think there was a very memorable couple of days. One was when Linda and Senator Hill and Senator Hargrove and Senator Nelson, 4 people from very different backgrounds, had a press conference together to announce a budget. In the prior 20 years, I had never seen that happen. Even in the tie, in the House, we really didn't have that. They did it together. And when we walked on the floor to pass that first budget, we only had 22 of our members on the floor. That sort of trust is sort of rare. 22 of us walked out on the floor. We eventually passed that budget that day with 30 votes. I think the public would like to see us repeat that. Joint press conference, 30 votes or more for a budget, and then negotiate with the other body.
And our new communications director has told us we have one more question, and we are going to listen to her.
Just really quickly, though, I think a year ago, people were skeptical and underestimated this coalition. But if you look at what happened and what we have done in the intervening year, we have delivered what we promised, and we have driven the agenda in the state of Washington to the benefit of Washington citizens, and we're going to come back in 2014 one member stronger.
I mean, think about it. $1 billion for K through 12, 0 tuition increase,
Yes.
no tax increases, in an environment where all people wanted to talk about was deficits, 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 taxes, taxes, taxes. What we did is say, let's not divide people, let's not play this bait and switch game. Let's give people what they want. And what people want is for us to prioritize, and that's exactly what we did.
Who gets the last question?
I have a last question, just have to ask one, on higher education. Danny Westney reported in the Seattle Times that the state subsidy to Boeing, if they built the 777X here, and if that tax package went in, would exceed the state subsidy to UW on an annual basis. Basically, you would be giving more away in tax incentives to Boeing than you would be putting in tax dollars into the University of Washington. You are claiming victory by holding the line on tuition, but there are many in the state who would say that the state is underfunding higher education, doing so at historically low levels. To what extent does this caucus believe that you need to turn that around, like you talked about in K through 12 education, and what is the plan, the path forward to do
Well,
that?
Boeing spends over $500 million, and they sent $500 million to Olympia. The last thing that we can afford from a higher education standpoint is to lose that $500 million if they leave town. So our primary goal is to make sure that, you know, Boeing, and not just Boeing, but all employers in Washington State, you know, it's a fluid environment out there. We need to be competitive. And that's really what we have brought to the table is you can be competitive, you can be compassionate, you can do really good things.
But this was just a data point, so on the higher education, because you've talked a lot about K-12, and you know you've got the Supreme Court ruling. What is?
Our plan is to put more into higher education.
But how?
But, well, that's what we're doing right now. We have a task force studying performance funding. We're looking at that, how that's going to roll out maybe in policy for the next session. I'm not sure whether we're going to get there or not, but that's where we're going. Similarly to what we've done in K-12 and would like to continue to do in K-12, and that's, you know, get more performance for the dollars that we're putting in investment in our students.
Look at past performance. When we came into this session, the higher education community was dreading the kind of cuts that they're going to have to take because of McCleary. What happened? 12.4% growth in higher education budget. 0 growth in tuition. I think the numbers speak for themselves.
But can you build on that?
Look at the multiple, yeah, we can, of course we can.
I think
We
that does it.
prioritize.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.